welcome to History Through Fiction, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Mustful, and today I'm happy to be joined by Sarah Penner, author of the novel The Amalfi Coast. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you for having me. And just to make sure we get the title right, it's the Amalfi Curse.
Oh, I said the Amalfi Coast. You know
It's
what? We won't re-record that. We'll just let it stay in.
yeah,
Um,
it's funny. My agent's assistant did the exact same thing just last week in an email. So it's kind of why we chose the title in a way, because the Amalfi Curse sounds so similar to the Amalfi Coast, that it just kind of rolls off your tongue. So it's perfectly fine that people every so often make mistakes with that.
yeah, works perfectly. Well, I actually want to start with the job of your main character in one of the timelines, Haven. She's a nautical engineer. That's what caught my attention first, was I never thought of that as a job, but then I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
of course that's a job. So tell me about you figuring out that, oh, this is a job that would work for this story, and just kind of diving into, no pun intended,
Yep.
what that means to be a nautical archaeologist.
Yeah, so Haven is the protagonist in the present day timeline, and she's a nautical archaeologist, which is a real job. She went to Texas A&M University, which actually has a nautical archaeology program. And the reason why I selected that profession for her, it's kind of twofold. The first reason is that I knew in the early planning stages of the Amalfi Curse that there was going to be shipwrecks, and those wrecks would hold secrets, long sunken secrets. So I had to ask myself, what type of profession would make someone not only able to go scuba dive and explore these wrecks, but be intimately familiar with the excavation and the photography process, and really kind of have exceptional knowledge around shipwrecks and the history of piracy routes and trade and all of those different things. So I landed on nautical archaeology, but it really suited the story well, because I also, in all of my books, so the Amalfi Curse is my third book, and in all of my books, I like to have the female characters be kind of best in class in a semi-technical field. And so nautical archaeology is technical, and there's a lot of science and regulations there, that my characters had to be aware of. Now, the hiccup is that I have no background in nautical archaeology. So before I started writing Haven's narrative, I took several online certification courses in shipwreck excavation and shipwreck photography. But then also her diving scenes, her scuba diving scenes, those were a lot easier for me to write because my husband and I, we've been scuba divers for about 10 years. So I knew all of the safety measures that go into place. I know what it's like to get geared up with a wetsuit and the entire scuba kit, which has a lot of knobs and hoses and all of these things. So I kind of had some experience on that side, but it was really interesting learning about nautical archaeology and the many standards that these underwater archaeologists have to adhere to.
I think that's just amazing that you went so far to get certified in those
Mhm.
roles. I think I would have just watched a couple YouTube videos and considered myself an expert, so that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think that readers, they enjoy learning without realizing they're learning. That's one of my favorite things, especially about historical fiction, because they often don't realize they're learning about the way that people used to live. They're reading about what people do for work or what they're eating, and they just don't realize that at the same time they're gaining all of this knowledge. So I've had so many readers say, Sarah, I love that in your books, I'm learning about these different professions and how to approach archival material, or in this case, what it's like to go scuba diving. I tried to make those scenes really sensory in nature. So I wanted to do those scenes justice and make sure I was using the correct terminology. So that was why I really made the extra effort to educate myself.
Let's stay there for a moment before we get more into the story. I read that you had a meeting with Dr. Mary Malloy at the Historical Novel Society conference.
Mhm.
So tell us about that meeting and also talk about how great that is to meet people in person at a conference, because I think that writers need to know just how valuable that is.
Yeah, so I was in the early revision phases of the Amalfi Curse at the last Historical Novel Society conference. So that would have been in 2023, I think. Um, yeah, that sounds right. And she gave a class that anyone could attend as part of the HNS conference on sailing and shipwrecks. And of course, I was like sitting in the front row with my notepad out. It was this single session I was most excited about for the whole conference. I took a slew of notes. I took pictures of every slide she put up. And I, most importantly, got her contact info. And then when I was ready to do really kind of an overhaul of the sailing and nautical terminology in my book, I emailed her and I asked her what her hourly rate as a consultant is. She's got a PhD in maritime history, so she's very well educated. And I just wanted to make sure that I was everything from berths and hatches and the names of different decks and what's going on a ship's main deck during a storm. I needed to know all of these things, and I did my very best, but there was no comparison to her knowledge. And so I sent her an early copy of the Malfi Curse. She spent a lot of hours going through it with a fine-tooth comb and sent me probably a 20-page document of everything that either were suggestions or for me or things that I had just outright messed up. And I was almost like numb upon reading her feedback because I realized how very much work I needed to do. But rest assured, I ticked and tied every bullet point on her list, and the book is 1,000 times better for it. And she even sent me pictures that I had never been able to find myself of, for instance, old ships, since they didn't have modern light, and to have an open flame on a ship was very dangerous. There were these prisms, these glass prisms in the floor, which would be the next deck's ceiling, and they kind of let natural light in through these prisms. And because of the way a prism is designed, it would sort of spread the light. Anyways, she sent me these awesome pictures of, hey, here are some real pictures of shipwrecks that have been, or I'm sorry, ships that have been preserved and their prisms, so you can see what they look like. I would have never known or been able to find that on my own. So she was worth every penny, and I thank her profusely in the acknowledgments of the book. And I highly recommend for any authors who are writing a really technical topic like that to engage a consultant, because not only will it make your narrative more believable, but these consultants and historians, they love helping authors like us.
Not to go too far with this, but it's very fascinating to me because you always hear the cliche, write what you know. Well, clearly you're not exactly writing what you know.
Yep.
Do you see that as a hurdle, or do you see that you invite that, and does that kind of excite you and give you more passion for the project you're working on?
I once wrote I guess it was an essay or like a craft piece. I think it was for Writer Unboxed, and it was debunking common writing quotes. And that was the quote that I said is BS, in my opinion. Write what you know. Why not instead write what interests you and go learn about that thing, and then you know it, then you know that thing. Now I will say it's easier to write what you know, which is why the scuba diving scenes came effortlessly to me, because I've experienced it dozens if not hundreds of times myself. And the shipwreck exploration and excavation pieces, it was much slower, like physically typing the words because I'm referring to notes or what have you. But I learned it I wrote it. The reviews have been phenomenal, and I'm really, really pleased with it. And so I'm always telling writers, ignore that old adage because if you don't know it, you can learn it, and then you do know it, and you can go write about it.
Well, let's get back into the story. Your historical timeline has a protagonist, Maria De Luca, um, or I'm sorry, Marie. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about Marie and the context of the historical timeline.
Yeah, so I pronounce her name Mari, although I'm sure many, as they're reading, see Marie in their head. But so Mari, she's a young woman. She is the sort of leader of this coven of sea witches in 1821. But she reveals really on page 3 or 4 that she actually loathes the sea. And it's sort of this irony that she has such control over something she hates so much. The reason she hates it is because it has taken both her mother and her little sister from her. So you learn about that in the first chapter, the very important people in her life that she lost to the sea. She recounts seeing her little sister drown in the waves. So she's expected daily to kind of commune with the ocean, but she really despises it and villainizes it. And over the course of the story, there are some very real threats coming from these pirates and these groups of powerful men who live nearby. And in order to protect these other witches of the sea and to protect her community, she has to be the kind of draw on her entire toolkit and her arsenal and everything she knows about her power over the ocean in order to save herself and the people she loves. Now, sort of blended into this is a love story. So she's in love with someone she's not supposed to be in love with. He's a sailor, very much working class, and he's making his way to her on a ship right now. But the spells that she's putting over the ocean to protect herself put him at risk. So that is what she's dealing with is whether to protect her community or to protect her secret lover who's making his way to her right now.
And without giving away too much, can you talk about the connection between the two timelines?
Yes. So I just left you kind of on a cliffhanger that Mari has to choose who to save. And so that is the mystery that Haven, my present day nautical archaeologist, uncovers. When her story begins, she's in Positano, and she's going to be researching and exploring this cluster of mysterious shipwrecks. But on her first day in Positano, there is a yacht sinking that no one can explain. And several important people die on this yacht. And she realizes kind of this curse affecting these watercraft and the ocean. It seems to be coming alive again, and there's more recent activity, and she can't quite figure out why. So Haven is trying to understand what's going on with the ocean right now. Why are we having these strange tidal maelstroms and waves and whirlpools and all of this that are sinking ships and killing people? We're having that, and then also she starts to uncover through the wrecks and the archival material the love story that Mari, we explore in Mari's timeline and kind of solving what happens in her life as well.
As we established at the top of the interview, this is called the Amalfi Curse. It takes
Mhm.
place at the Amalfi coast.
Mhm.
Every region has its own bit of lore, legend, mythology. How much of this lore is based on your imagination, and how much of it is actually real and is in that region?
That's a great question. So, Italians have a very strong legacy of witchcraft, and the Italian word for that is stregaria, and the word for witch in Italian is strega. So, when I first began my research, this posed a conundrum for me because there is such thing, in my opinion, as our characters having too much power. I didn't want my witches to have control over everything. So I quickly decided their domain is control over the sea. They're water witches. But then within that, they can't do everything. They can't affect weather patterns and atmospheric things. But I gave them at the front of the book, you can see I gave them 7 specific incantations, and that is the extent of what they can do with the ocean. So they can make water ebb, they can make water flow, they can make water colder, they can generate small whirlpools or a huge, very powerful whirlpool. They can find lost treasures under the water. So there are a few different things they're able to do. And those parameters, it's counterintuitive. It sounds restrictive, but it actually allows me to kind of keep my narrative intact. And, all of my books are historical fiction with elements of magical realism. And I find this to be true with all of my stories. There can't be something just as broad as magic and that my characters can do anything. There have to be some rules, and that keeps me on a path as the author that I can follow and I can really develop those smaller specific rules. So that was fun for me, was taking this legend of Stragaria in Italy and sort of this big cloud of possibility and narrowing it down into my witches are witches of the sea, and these are the 7 things they can do. That was entirely invented and imaginative on my part of things. But I think it was perfect for this setting because Positano on the Amalfi Coast, of course, it is right on the water. It wasn't a teeny tiny fishing village in the 1800s. Now everyone knows Positano is the beautiful hillside village where the influencers go and the rich and the famous. But in the early 1800s, it was a very humble fishing village. So there was no better profession or role for my witches than to be witches of the sea.
You've talked about all the work that has gone into this, and that it is getting some really good reviews. Um, but you also mentioned in your acknowledgments that you really struggled with the early draft and that you
Mm,
had to sit with that struggle. Can you
yeah.
talk about that process and what you learned from it?
Yeah. So, Stephen King is known for saying in his memoir on writing that there's no right way to write a book. There's just the way to write the book that you're on. And I have found that to be so true when drafting every single one of my novels. And I'm going through it right now, writing my 4th book. I feel like every day is a sliver of an existential crisis, that my best work is behind me. I have forgotten how to pull together a story, and then I hear things like what you just said. You've reminded me that in my acknowledgments, I complained about how difficult drafting the Amalfi Curse was. And that's all, I've almost like forgotten that that's the case. But it is, and it was. So I had outlined the Amalfi Curse pretty extensively. My agent, my editor had cleared and approved the outline. And then as I started writing, it just wasn't coming together for me. Like I think of sort of making a loaf of bread, and you've poured in the flour and the water and the yeast, and you just look at it and like it won't form. You think you have the correct ingredients, but it just won't form. And my agent, I had a call with her, and I remember distinctly, I kind of wanted her to give me the permission to quit this idea and move to something new, but she wouldn't do it. She was like, "No, it's okay to be challenged." I was comparing it in some ways to my 2nd book, The London Seance Society, which somehow I drafted in 11 weeks. And I think I naively thought, well, okay, so I've got it figured out now. Like every book, I'll be able to draft pretty easily. And then when I was trying to draft the Amalfi Curse off of that outline, it just wasn't working for me. And so my agent gave me the tough love and said, "Keep at it. You need to just sit with it. You've got time. You've got a team. You've got the skill. So just sit with it." And I did. I trudged through the chapters, and then one by one, you start to page by page, you start to kind of see the story coming together. And then, of course, during the revision phase, in my experience, that's always where the magic happens. So even that very first revision, your next pass through the book, you know so much more than you did when you started. So if you can just, I think this is why a lot of aspiring authors throw in the towel and don't get to where they want to be, because the first draft is such a drag for so many of us. And as I said, I'm kind of sludging through my draft of my fourth book right now. It's going so slow. I'm questioning myself every single day, but I just wake up and I keep putting words down, and I know soon enough I'll have a first draft that I can work with.
Well, speaking as an editor, I recently wrote a developmental edit on a first draft, and it's hard to communicate that there is a gem in here, like to let the author know that I'm sorry I have to tell you all this, but if you
Mhm.
can stay focused and patient, we can get there. But yeah, you're absolutely right that you got to sludge through it.
Yeah, and finding that gem is important, and something that we have to remind ourselves of on the days that feel especially discouraging. It's like you kind of just have to visualize, well, what is the through the through line that when people pick up this book and talk about it, that's the gem they're going to be talking about. And everything else can kind of be manipulated and revised accordingly. But as long as like your basic pitch of the story is solid, and there's stakes and there's conflict, it should be okay.
You're a New York Times best-selling author. You've become very well known, and you're always out there now doing traveling and doing events, talking to people. Can you talk about that side of the process? Because obviously you're not sitting in your office just writing novels and revising novels. You're out there talking to people like me, and I don't know if you're contractually obligated or not. I assume you're not. So talk about what that means and why you do it.
Yeah, so I'm not contractually obligated to do anything, but you're exactly right. Anyone who follows me on social media can see that I not only do I get out and talk to readers and do sort of outside the box promotional stuff, not only do I do it, but I love it. And I think people can see that I'm passionate about it. So I'm always asking and inquiring about speaking opportunities. I've done some really fun events through my speakers bureau with libraries and book festivals and different conferences. I love meeting with readers one on one. So, very, or so, not one on one, but like book clubs and different events. So, I'll almost never turn down an opportunity to get out in my community and do a little bookstore event. I'm friends with a lot of authors. So tonight, for instance, I'll be interviewing Fiona Davis at a local bookstore. So that's a good way also to sort of expand my readership, is tap into the readership of my peers and other authors. But then I have a corporate background. I spent 13 years in finance, so I'm really comfortable with public speaking. But I also think I have some executive management skills that have proved really useful. So I know how to manage a website. My website is completely designed and built by me. I know how to sort of analyze spreadsheets and my sales data and ask the right questions and ask if there are correlations between something I might be seeing here and how the books might do. So I think that that has definitely helped. And then lastly, I'm really crafty and I love sort of incorporating crafts where I can into my publicity. So, for instance, um, I like to hand stamp my own book plates. So, as sort of a form of pre-order incentive, I tell people, if you pre-order the book, I will hand stamp a seashell on a book plate and make it out to whatever you want it to say. Just this morning, I got into Canva, which is my favorite software to use for sort of digital marketing purposes. And I designed some business cards, and I generated a QR code to for people to pre-order my next book when I'm at a speaking event later this month. So I love just playing with it, whether it's digitally or pen and paper. I love kind of finding ways to think outside the box with my promotion. It does help that my husband and I don't have kids. That's by choice. And so I think I have a lot more time than other authors. And that's something I acknowledge and is by design. Um, so I probably, that's probably part of it when, authors look at me and they say, gosh, like, how do you get out and do all of this? Well, I don't have kids, and that makes a big difference.
With all those skills, would you be interested in a job? I have one for you.
I know it sounds like your business is growing. Sadly, that's not some. I think I've got my own list of admin to do.
Um, you talked about craftiness. Well, your books have done so well that now they're coming out with these specially designed editions. How does that come together? They're so beautiful.
Yeah, so The Lost Apothecary, which has sold over 1 million copies worldwide, this past summer, my publisher sent me a very exciting email and she said, surprise, we are going to do an exclusive special edition of The Lost Apothecary with blue sprayed edges and really pretty gold foil accent on the front. Um, End papers they did, it's kind of like this dark purple imagery of like little vials and jars on a shelf. And then they didn't tell me, so I was surprised to see that at the back of the special edition they included the first 2 chapters of the Amalfi Curse. So that special edition is for sale wherever books are sold. I didn't ask them to do it. I didn't even know they were doing it until it was done and in the works. So I read recently there was a link that Publishers Marketplace provided that these special editions are sort of the cool thing right now, and I am seeing them a lot for some other authors, both with my imprint, but also just kind of generally. I think that readers are proud of what they can put on their bookshelves, and there are a lot of readers who collect books and want these really gorgeous editions on their shelves. So I think it's sort of the in thing right now. I don't know if it'll last, but I'm thrilled that The Lost Apothecary got a special collector's edition.
Did you did you travel to Positano, and what was that like? Because you talked about it now being an area for influencers and
Mhm.
very celebrities maybe, but I'm assuming you went there and were poking around, doing some research, trying to get a view, just really figure out the setting. Tell me about, did you travel there?
Yeah, so my husband and I went to Positano during a sort of tour of Italy in 2022. I was very inspired by the city, particularly this old abandoned villa on a hilltop on the west side of the village. So anyone who's been to Positano, you might actually have photos of it without knowing it. If you've taken a picture of the hillside and all of those beautiful, colorful buildings, this old abandoned villa might be in that picture. But I looked at that villa and I told my husband, I don't know what my next book is, but it's going to be set in Positano and it's going to have witches, and the witches are going to live in that villa. And that's exactly what I wrote. And we did try and climb up to that old abandoned villa, but there was a gate and we would have been trespassing. And I decided, as many cool things as I've done in the spirit of researching books, I don't want spending a night in an Italian jail to be one of them. So I decided let's not trespass and go check out this old villa. And in some ways, that leaves more to the imagination, anyways. So I was able to then create the story. We also returned in 2023 so that we could take a private boat tour to these 3 little islets, the Ligali Islets, and sort of see up close kind of where some of these shipwrecks happened, at least fictionally in my book. And then I went to Naples, which is the largest major metropolis in that area, and we did a private tour of an archive, and that inspired the archive that Haven visits in the Amalfi Curse.
You had mentioned that you are working on a new draft right now. Can you give us a
Mhm.
little hint of what that's about?
Yes. So my fourth book is a sequel to The Lost Apothecary. And I don't want to give away any spoilers, but at the end of The Lost Apothecary, there's a character that everyone always wants to know more about and what happened to her next. And so this next book is going to be her story.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. Congratulations on the Amalfi Curse
Thank
and on
you.
all your success. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, Colin.